There is a particular kind of shift that does not announce itself the way eclipses do. It does not turn the moon red or send the internet into a spiral. It just arrives. And you might not notice it in the first hour or even the first day, but something in the atmosphere is different. Something in how you feel about a person, a situation, a possibility you had quietly filed away has moved. Not because you decided to move it, because the sky moved first. That happened this morning. At 5:45 a.m. Eastern Time, Venus left Pisces and stepped into Aries. And for Venus, that is not a small change of scenery. Pisces and Aries are as different as two consecutive signs can possibly be. Pisces is the end of the zodiac, the sign of surrender and depth and everything that lives below the surface of ordinary understanding. Aries is the beginning, the first sign, the raw initiation point before any conditioning sets in. Moving from Pisces into Aries is not a step. It is a leap across a fundamental divide. But here is the part that really caught my attention when I looked at today's chart. Venus did not just enter Aries. Within hours of crossing that threshold, it is already moving toward a conjunction with Neptune, which is sitting at 1 degree Aries. The exact conjunction hits tomorrow morning, March 7th at 6:27 a.m. Eastern. Then, less than 2 days after that, on March 8th, Venus meets Saturn at 2 degrees Aries. Same sign, back to back, two of the most different planets in the solar system. Venus conjunct Neptune. Venus conjunct Saturn. 3 days, two completely opposing energies, and Venus is the one walking straight into both of them. If you've been feeling something unusual today, something that pulls in two directions at once, a desire to reach for something and a hesitation about whether it is real, a romantic longing right alongside a voice asking you to slow down and be honest, that is not confusion. That is the literal geometry of this sky working itself out inside of you. Let me get into what this actually means. And before I do, quick thing, if you have been tracking this eclipse season and the Pisces weather we have been in, leave a like and subscribe. I put these out regularly. And drop Aries era in the comments. I want to see who is ready for this shift in energy. All right, here we go. Let me start with something that rarely gets said about Venus in Aries, which is that Venus in this sign is technically in what astrologers call its detriment. Aries is the opposite sign of Libra, and Libra is one of the two signs Venus rules naturally. So when Venus is in Aries, it is in the opposite sign from home, and detriment does not mean broken or powerless. It means operating outside of its most comfortable conditions, which produces a very different kind of expression. Venus in Libra is graceful, it is diplomatic, it considers all sides, weighs options, keeps the peace, prefers beauty and balance and the elegant management of connection. Venus in Aries does none of that. Venus in Aries wants what it wants, and it wants it now, without apology, without waiting to see if the other person is ready, without the careful back and forth of courtship as a slow negotiation. The word most astrologers reach for with Venus in Aries is directness, but I think the better word is courage. Because what Venus in Aries actually represents is the willingness to act on desire before the outcome is guaranteed. To say the thing, to reach for the person, to make the move before you know how it lands. Not recklessness exactly, though the shadow side of this placement can tip that way. More like the specific bravery of someone who has decided that not saying the thing is worse than saying it and being wrong about how it is received. That energy is arriving now, on March 6th, after weeks of a sky saturated with Pisces. And the contrast is sharp. Think about what Pisces energy does to desire. It softens it, it makes it dreamy, it wraps it in ambiguity and depth, and that particular feeling of longing that is almost pleasant to sit inside, because at least the longing is real, even when the outcome is uncertain. A lot of people have been living inside that Piscean fog with their feelings, especially with Mercury retrograde adding another layer of inward pull since February 26th. Feelings have been real but unnamed. Wants have been present but unspoken. Connections have been felt but not acted on. Venus entering Aries is the sky saying, enough sitting inside the feeling. Now you do something with it. That can feel like a jolt if you have been comfortable in the ambiguity, and it can feel like a relief if you have been exhausted by it. Here is where it gets layered, and I think this is the part that actually makes March 6th through 8th one of the more interesting few days in the calendar this month. Venus in Aries conjunct Neptune sounds on the surface like a romantic dream. Neptune is the planet of imagination, of idealism, of the love that transcends ordinary reality, of the feeling that this person or this connection is somehow larger than what your ordinary life contains. And Venus, the planet of love, desire, beauty, and attraction, meeting Neptune creates an atmosphere that is genuinely enchanting. The feeling of something fated, the sense that a connection is more than circumstantial. Art feels more meaningful. People look more beautiful. Longing takes on a quality that feels almost sacred. If you meet someone new in the next day or two, they may feel like a dream, and that is not a small thing. It is worth paying attention to. But here is the thing about Neptune conjunctions, and I try to say this clearly whenever it comes up. Neptune does not lie to you maliciously. It just shows you the most luminous possible version of whatever is in front of you, which can sometimes obscure the more ordinary and important details. The last time Venus was conjunct Neptune in Aries with this same configuration, back in 2025 when Venus was moving through Aries earlier in the year, there was a similar quality of enchantment. And what I noticed in the charts and in the kinds of questions people were asking me then was this: some of the connections that felt most fated in that window were genuinely significant, and some of them were Neptune doing what Neptune does, draping something familiar in unfamiliar light and making it appear more extraordinary than the daylight version would bear out. So the practice with Venus conjunct Neptune is not to dismiss the feeling. The feeling is real. It is data. It is just not the complete picture yet. You hold it, you feel it, you allow it to open your heart in the way Neptune is very good at opening hearts, and you also, gently, keep one part of your awareness tethered to what is actually true, actually verifiable, actually consistent when the enchantment quiets down a little. Mercury is still retrograde in Pisces right now, which adds another layer to this. The planet of information and communication moving backward through the sign most prone to fog in the Zodiac. At exactly the same moment Venus is conjunct Neptune means that clarity is not the dominant quality of the next several days. What is dominant is feeling, impression, intuition. And the honest answer is that some of those feelings will prove true, and some of them will prove to be the retrograde Neptune doing interesting things to your perception. March 20th, when Mercury stations direct, is when the fog clears in a meaningful way. Between now and then, the rule is, feel everything and finalize nothing. That is not a limitation. That is actually the most intelligent use of this particular sky. If the Venus-Neptune conjunction is all dream and longing, and the luminous version of desire, what happens 2 days later when Venus meets Saturn at 2 degrees Aries is a completely different conversation. Saturn is the planet of reality, of structure, of what actually holds up over time versus what looks good in a particular light. Saturn tests things, not cruelly but honestly. It asks, is this real? Can this actually work? What does this connection require of you? Not just what does it offer you. What are you willing to commit to, and what are you not? Venus conjunct Saturn in Aries, arriving on March 8th, is the moment after Neptune's enchantment when the practical questions knock on the door. And this sequence, Neptune first and Saturn second, is actually a meaningful order, because Neptune opens the heart. It expands your sense of what is possible. It makes you willing to feel something you might otherwise have kept guarded. And then Saturn arrives not to close that door, but to ask, okay, you are open. Now what are you building with that openness? For a lot of people, Saturn in a Venus transit gets framed as the wet blanket, the part where reality intrudes and the romance gets complicated. But I want to offer a different frame, because I think it is more useful. Venus conjunct Saturn in Aries is actually the moment you find out which of your desires have roots and which ones were just weather. The ones with roots are still standing after Saturn passes through. The ones that will weather the infatuations, the projections, the Neptunian mirages, those will feel more transparent once Saturn has a look at them. That is not a loss, that is information. And given that we are still inside Mercury retrograde, where the theme of revisiting and evaluating again is already active, the Venus-Saturn conjunction on March 8th is actually a useful checkpoint. Not to make final decisions, but to ask honest questions of yourself about what you are reaching for and why. There is also a practical financial dimension to Venus-Saturn contacts that is worth naming. Venus rules money, resources, and values alongside its more romantic associations. Saturn conjunct Venus in Aries on March 8th is a good moment to be disciplined about spending, to take a practical look at what you are investing in and whether those investments reflect what you actually value, and to have the honest conversations about money that Mars in Pisces energy has been inclined to avoid through the last few days. The Piscean fog is thinning. Saturn is asking for receipts, not in a punishing way, in an organizing way. Here is the astronomical piece that I think deserves more attention than it is getting, and it connects directly to why March 6th feels the way it does, even before Venus has met Neptune or Saturn individually. When Venus crossed into Aries this morning, it did not just join an empty sign. It joined Neptune at 1 degree Aries and Saturn at 2 degrees Aries. That means we have, as of today, a stellium in the very early degrees of Aries. 3 planetary bodies in the same sign, clustered within just 2 degrees of each other. Stelliums concentrate energy. They make the themes of the sign involved unavoidable. And a Venus, Neptune, Saturn stellium in Aries is a particularly interesting combination because these 3 planets have completely different agendas that are now occupying the same very small space. Venus wants connection, beauty, love, pleasure, value. Neptune wants transcendence, depth, the dissolution of boundaries, the feeling of unity with something larger. Saturn wants structure, honesty, reality that holds up over time, commitment, and accountability. All 3 packed into the first 2 degrees of the most initiating, self-first, action-oriented sign in the zodiac. What this produces is something I would describe as desire, with pressure on both sides. On one side, Neptune is expanding the feeling outward, making it feel cosmic and meaningful and possibly fated. On the other side, Saturn is applying downward pressure, asking you to be real about what this means, what you can actually sustain, whether the feeling survives contact with ordinary life. Aries in the middle of all this is just trying to move. Aries does not do well with ambiguity. It wants to know what direction to run in, and then run there. And right now, with Neptune saying this might be everything and Saturn saying, but let's be careful, Aries is getting genuinely mixed signals. The result for most people is going to feel like an urgency to act on something romantic or relational, paired with an unusual amount of thoughtfulness about whether to do so. That combination is actually healthier than either extreme on its own. Pure Neptune impulse with no Saturn would send you running toward someone on the basis of a feeling that has not been tested. Pure Saturn caution with no Neptune would keep you from opening your heart at all. The tension between them, uncomfortable as it is actually productive. Work with the tension. Do not try to resolve it prematurely. What is clarifying itself right now about what you want in love and in your life is worth sitting with a few more days. Aries, Venus arriving in your sign is the most direct hit of this ingress, but it is a more nuanced version than usual because Neptune and Saturn are both waiting just ahead of the ingress point. The desire to assert yourself, to stop waiting and start moving, that is real and it is supported. Just do it with your eyes open. Neptune in your sign can make your own perceptions about a person or situation more idealized than accurate right now. And Saturn right behind it is asking you to build something lasting rather than just something exciting. Venus in Aries at its best is brave love. This week, brave also means honest. Libra, Venus is your ruling planet, and any Venus transit moves your chart. With Venus in your opposite sign, the axis activated is the one between what you want for yourself and what you accommodate for the sake of connection. A relationship dynamic may be asking for a more direct conversation than you have been willing to start. The Libra instinct is to wait for balance to restore itself. The Venus in Aries energy coming through your chart right now is suggesting that balance does not always restore on its own. Sometimes someone has to say the hard thing first. This week, Libra may be that person. Scorpio, early Aries activates your 6th house of daily routine, health habits, and the work you do every day. This is less about romance, and more about whether your daily habits are actually aligned with your values. The Neptune and Saturn picture here suggests you may have been telling yourself a story about why something is fine when your body or your intuition has been saying otherwise. Saturn in this position is asking you to get honest about the daily life you are building. Sagittarius, Venus in Aries is a fire trine to your sign, one of the more naturally pleasant transits available. Creative work and romantic connections have positive momentum right now. Neptune adds inspiration. Saturn reminds you to follow through past the excited beginning, which is sometimes where Sagittarius loses the thread. Start something and then stay with it past the spark. Cancer, Venus in Aries puts it in a square to your sign, which means some friction around career and public life. A tension between what you want personally and what your professional situation asks of you may be getting sharper. Neptune in your 10th house area can mean your professional identity has been built on something that feels meaningful but needs a reality check. Saturn is doing that check. Not comfortable but useful. Leo, Venus in Aries trines your sign and activates your 9th house of belief, travel, and the larger framework through which you interpret your life. Neptune here opens a sense of possibility, a feeling that something more expansive is available than your current daily life contains. Saturn grounds that by asking what actual steps you are taking toward the expanded version of your life. Is belief doing the work of becoming a plan? For Leo right now, that is the central question. Pisces, Venus just left your sign after a stretch that suited you well. The shift into Aries may feel a little abrupt. What was soft and ambiguous is now asking for directness. The Neptune conjunction still available through tomorrow means there is some Piscean softness in how desire expresses, but by March 8th, Saturn is asking for honesty. The invitation for Pisces this week is simple. Take one feeling that has been living only in private and say it out loud or act on it. Just one. See what it opens. For Taurus, Virgo, Gemini, Capricorn, and Aquarius, the most universal quality of Venus in Aries that everyone accesses is a slight uptick in social confidence and directness. After weeks of heavy Pisces fog, something in the atmosphere shifts toward a willingness to say what you actually want. Taurus feels it around shared resources. Virgo feels the relational warming that the eclipse did not provide. Capricorn gets a useful prompt around home and family decisions that have been pending. Gemini and Aquarius get a mild energy tilting forward that, after all the Piscean retrograde weather, lands like a window being opened. There is a larger context for this Venus ingress that I want to name because I think it matters for how you carry this transit beyond just the next few days. The first quarter of 2026 has been one of the more internally demanding astrological seasons in recent memory. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction perfected in February, which is a once in roughly 36-year event and represents a collision between the structures we rely on and the dissolving of what those structures were built on. Mercury went retrograde through Pisces territory, slowing everything down, pulling people back through emotional history they thought they had already moved past. The total lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 3rd was precise and unsparing about what was not working in people's daily lives. And through all of this, the dominant planetary energy has been water, specifically Pisces, which is beautiful and deep and true, but also heavy in the way that immersion in feeling is always heavy. Venus stepping into Aries today is the first genuinely cardinal fire energy we have had land in a significant way since early in the year. Cardinal fire is the energy of new beginning, of initiative, of the willingness to step into something before you know how it turns out. It is the energy that does not wait for permission, does not require the complete plan, does not ask whether the conditions are ideal before moving. That shift in the quality of available energy, from dissolution and depth to ignition and beginning, is something worth actually feeling today. Not just understanding intellectually, but allowing to register in your body as a change. Something that was ending has ended. Something that was being cleared has been cleared. And now the sky is handing you the first real spark of forward motion. The specific form that takes will be different for each person. For some, it is a relationship conversation that has been waiting. For some, it is a creative project that has been in the planning phase too long. For some, it is a decision about a direction in life that has been circling without landing. For some, it is simply the feeling of being slightly more themselves again after weeks of operating in the fog. All of those are valid expressions of Venus stepping into Aries, and all of them carry the same underlying theme, the willingness to begin, not to complete, not to guarantee, not to secure, just to begin. The Neptune conjunction that follows tomorrow will remind you that the most beautiful things often start with a quality of faith that outpaces certainty. The Saturn conjunction that arrives on March 8th will remind you that lasting things are built on honesty rather than just longing. But neither of those conversations can happen if you do not first do the Aries thing, step into the fire, commit to the direction, start moving. One thing I would be doing this content a disservice by not mentioning is what happens in 4 days on March 10th. Jupiter stations direct at 15 degrees, Cancer at 11:30 p.m. Eastern. Jupiter has been retrograde since November 9th, 2025. That is 4 months of Jupiter moving backward through Cancer, which is the sign of its exaltation, meaning the sign where Jupiter operates at its most generous, its most fortunate, its most emotionally abundant. Retrograde Jupiter in Cancer has been building internal emotional understanding. What genuinely nourishes you? What kind of belonging you are actually seeking? What home means to you now versus what it meant when you were operating from a less aware version of yourself. When Jupiter stations direct on March 10th, that internal understanding starts finding external expression. Things that have been stuck, opportunities that went quiet, emotional decisions that have been suspended in some internal waiting room, those start to move again, and they move in the direction of whatever emotional clarity you have been building during the retrograde. Here is why that matters for today's Venus ingress specifically. Venus in Aries is sparking desire and initiative right now. And in 4 days, Jupiter in Cancer is going to turn direct and start amplifying the emotional and relational growth that has been quietly compounding for months. Venus in Aries saying start something plus Jupiter direct in Cancer saying the foundation you have been building is now ready to hold real weight is a genuinely powerful combination. The fire sign initiative meeting the water sign abundance. The courage to begin meeting the warmth of what has been prepared. The next 2 weeks are not a holding pattern. They are a launching sequence. Venus in Aries runs through March 30th. Jupiter direct in Cancer runs through June when Jupiter moves into Leo. Mercury stations direct on March 20th, the same day the Sun moves into Aries for the astrological new year. All of that is 4 planets shifting from retrograde or transitional energy into direct, outward moving expression within a 14-day window. If you have been feeling like something has been building without quite arriving, this is the window where it starts to arrive. Not all at once, not dramatically but steadily, and with more momentum than the first 2 months of the year allowed. Pay attention to what you feel called to start between now and March 20th. Pay attention to who crosses your path, what conversations open, what felt impossible a month ago that now feels simply like something that requires a step. That shift from impossible to simply requiring a step is Venus in Aries doing exactly what it does best. And Jupiter turning direct in 4 days is going to put real wind behind that first step. Practical territory, because that is where this matters most. Say something you have been sitting on. Venus in Aries rewards the person who moves first with honesty and courage, not the one who waits to see how the other person feels first. If something has been wanting expression, a feeling, an appreciation, a desire, a concern, this week is more available for that than anything the Piscean fog of the last month offered. Notice what desire actually survives the Neptune to Saturn sequence over the next few days. Something that feels urgent and dreamy today may feel different on March 8th, after Saturn has had a look at it. The desire that persists through both Neptune's enchantment and Saturn's honesty is the desire worth taking seriously. You do not have to force that discernment. Just stay aware as the days move through. Make one practical financial decision you have been postponing. Venus-Saturn contacts are among the most clarifying transits for sorting out your relationship to money and values. Not a large impulsive purchase. Mercury is still retrograde. But look honestly at where your spending and your stated values have drifted apart and make one small adjustment. Venus conjunct Saturn in Aries on March 8th is like the morning after fog lifts. You can see things that were not visible before. Do one creative thing that requires courage. Venus in Aries conjunct Neptune is genuinely good for the kind of creative work that requires you to be seen before you feel ready. Neptune opens the imagination, Aries supplies the nerve. That combination has a short window. And give yourself credit for what has already completed. The first 2 months of 2026 asked real things of real people. The eclipse was genuine. The Pisces fog was real. The internal work Mercury retrograde prompted was actual work, even without a visible product. As Venus moves into Aries and the energy tilts forward again, take a moment to register what you moved through before sprinting toward the next thing. Part of Saturn's honest accounting is recognizing what you have already done. Look, this transit is more layered than it sounds on paper. Venus in Aries entering a conjunction with Neptune and Saturn in the same week is not standard Venus in Aries energy. It is desire with pressure on both sides, fire with both a dream and a reality check built in. The first 2 months of this year were about getting honest with yourself, about what is real and what is not. Venus in Aries today is the first day of building on what that honesty cleared. The building starts with desire. It starts with allowing yourself to want something and being brave enough to move toward it without guaranteeing the outcome. That is the Aries part. It means keeping one eye on the dream and the other on what is actually true. That is Neptune and Saturn doing their jobs. And it requires a kind of courage that is not the courage of certainty. It is the courage of someone who has been through enough to know that waiting for certainty is its own kind of loss. The season is turning. The fire is back. If you have been through something real these past weeks, and you have, the first small stirring of something you want to reach for on the other side of it is not wishful thinking.